Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another week of Property of the Week, brought to you by PropertyLens. For those of you who don't know, I am Bob Frady, CEO and co-founder of PropertyLens. With me,
John Sigmund, president and co-founder of PropertyLens.
So John, this week we have a very special guest.
More special than Curtis Goldsboro?
You know what? You have forgotten more about insurance underwriting. He's special for inspecting, for insurance inspections. You're special for underwriting. Not that we're in the game, but, you bring an expertise that we really appreciate. By the way, everyone, that's Nick Lamparelli. He is the managing partner of Insurance Nerds. So welcome to the show, Nick Lamparelli.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
The man, the myth, the legend. I think John said that at one point. They're almost 30 years in insurance, various backgrounds. Started off selling auto and homeowners at a local corner agency, worked my way up to larger auto and homeowners. I could help you insure your Porsche one day, Bob. Did small business, worked my way up to middle market. Then I discovered catastrophe analytics. I've been doing catastrophe related stuff for the past 15 years. Co-founded a couple of MGAs, one successful exit, one not so successful exit. And a couple of summers ago, I took over as managing partner of Insurance Nerds, and we've, which has been predominantly a content community site. Turned 10 years old. PropertyLens was the fine sponsor of the cake at InsurTech Connect. So thank you, Bob.
You're welcome
for that. And but pivoted the business model to more of a marketing agency, not advertising, marketing and product marketing, product strategy, positioning, communication, thought leadership. So essentially, if you have a B2B insurance product, we can help you get in front of the right audience with the right messaging, and we can even help you with the product. I tend to do that a lot. I tend to stick my nose where it doesn't belong and say, can we change the name of this PropertyLens thing? It doesn't make any sense. Yours is perfect. So,
well, there you go. So Nick, back when we met, I believe you were living in New Hampshire, and now you're in Florida, because as a cat loving person, you wanna eat your own dog food. You wanna live in it.
That wasn't the reason why. It was
I think you should
mostly
go with
for
that.
Mostly for family, and so I could play softball year round.
Oh, there you go. Well, John and I, listen, we share that affliction. We both live in catastrophe exposed areas. John more than me, and so yeah, we appreciate that. So hey, Nick, here's what we do: we pick a property, preferably one that you know, and for everyone at home, by the way, click the subscribe button if you're into that kind of a thing. It makes us feel better about ourselves. Nick sends us an address. We run it through our system. Rather than walk through the whole thing, we'll just show you the results. We'll just get to the good part. So let me share my screen here. 2177 Fairmont Lane in beautiful Naples, Florida. So it looks like it's 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, built in 2007, correct. About 2,200 square feet. 0.17 acres lot, and it has been in a prior catastrophe.
We survived Ian.
Yes. This is the first thing that we show to people. This is a little bit of a flag. When we look at all of our data, especially our catastrophe data, we'll say, does this place look like it might have been affected in that? With PropertyLens, what we do is you put in an address, and we send out 30 workers across all different data sets, both internal and external, some of which we rent, some of which we built, and put it all together, run it through a series of rules and a series of AI to clean it up and make it work, and come up with what we call the lenses. So these are questions that you should ask depending upon where you are in the buying process. The first lens that we show is the buyer lens, which are, hey, I'm thinking about buying this house. What kind of questions should I ask to make sure I know what I'm getting into? And John, why don't you walk us through the buyer lens?
So the first thing, is Bob already sort of pointed out, is the fact that, we know that hurricanes have been in the hood. and that there was damage from this effect in the property. So, first thing you're going to want to check for is what happened. Was there a claim filed? All of the good stuff associated with that event. Other wind events, not necessarily associated with that hurricane, but with convective storms typically. So you get some pretty good, blows down there in Florida, and those over 65 miles an hour have a tendency to damage properties, knock over trees, things like that. So again, things that as a buyer you would definitely want to ask about. One of the interesting things as far as data goes, we built our own termite maps, and Florida is definitely known for them. Your termites like to tunnel, so it would be something to walk around the property, check the foundations, see if there are mud tunnels, but definitely have it inspected.
How are we doing so far?
So far, so good.
Any damage from the hurricane?
No significant damage. The wind did blow water into the crawl space, which then leaked into the on the ceiling. So there are stains in the ceiling, and there might be mold in the crawl space from the water that got in.
Okay. All right, John, continue.
All right. Cranking along. Roof looks like it's in great shape. About 18 years old. 57 years so left, so it's got to be a tile roof by default. We've gone out and taken a look at the 3 primary roofing materials, know the estimated lifespan for every state in the union. Clearly, events have an effect on the roof, but yours looks pretty good, which is always a pleasant thing to know. High risk of experiencing lightning. Florida, you might know, is known for lightning. So if you are, at the top of the hill, if there is a hill in Florida, you might want the rod. Otherwise, a whole house suppression system is not the world's worst investment, and it would be something that we would inform a buyer to ask about.
Is there a lightning suppression system built into the house?
I don't think so, Bob.
Okay. Has it been hit by lightning in the past?
I don't think it's been hit by lightning, but John is correct. We get a lot of lightning. We get thunderstorms pretty much every day in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lightning all around us.
Surge is probably the bigger issue, particularly if you're in an area where you have above ground lines. Mold is omnipresent in places that are nice and warm and humid, and you already mentioned mold in the crawl space. Sinkholes. Florida is not the only state that has sinkholes. Sinkholes are actually affect about 32 states. Florida is just the most renowned for them. And you happen to be, relatively close to an area that happens to have them. So something to be cautious about. Given the age of the property, a water heater inspection would be a good thing to have done. Same for the furnace. You're right on the cusp of needing to replace it. No solar panels. We definitely take a look for that and estimate what your savings would be if you had them. And then, no hydrants detected within 1,000 feet of the property. So that's what we can tell you. These are the things that, as a buyer, besides all the beautiful appliances and rooms and things like that you'd want to be asking the inspector for the seller about.
So for this property, has there been any shifting of the ground at all, or anything that might indicate that a sinkhole is potentially forming?
I had not even thought about it, Bob, until you brought it up. Thanks a lot. Now I need to go look. I don't think so.
Okay. And then the water heater age and the furnace age, have they been replaced since you've been there?
They have not, no.
Okay,
so
because a lot of times what happens in real estate is the current owner doesn't necessarily know what the prior owner did to the property. And when you get an inspection or when you get a disclosure from the seller, the big giant out in that is, I don't know. So a lot of times that's what people will say is, I don't know. So if you're a buyer, it's like, hey, here's the list of questions I want to ask. Make sure I ask these before I choose to buy this home. or make an offer on this home. And the agent will be like, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it because you're going to have to pay for it later.
Mm-hmm.
So then we say, all right, I love this house. Despite, whatever issues it may have, I want to make an offer on. And then you get an inspection. And we give this list, you print out this list to give to the inspector and say, make sure you check all of these things out before you finish the inspection. And that way, you as the buyer say, hey, you inspector, you work for me. Make sure you do this stuff. And it's things like, check for termite damage. Have you had any termite issues at the place?
No, with the HOA and the property, we've had a really significant insect program in place. So we're constantly spraying around for not just termites, all sorts of infestation, ants and other stuff. It is Florida, so there are a lot of bugs.
Oh, there's a lot of bugs. There's big giant bugs, and they're not pleasant to step on. So
No, they're not. Crunchy.
Yeah, it is. So this is the kind of thing where, okay, you've made the decision. Now you just want to check and make sure that there isn't anything hiding that A, might want to make you renegotiate the price, or B, give you some sort of calculus in your head. It's like, okay, I know I'm going to have to do this. I've talked to the inspector. Yeah, there's some issues. We got to handle this when we go forward. So going in exactly what you're getting into.
Yeah, Bob, I think for anyone that's in Florida, like what I've learned and what this would have helped, especially like with properties that, they have the Mediterranean tiles that's very popular here. And tiles are pretty resilient to wind, but they do crack and they do age with time. So the cracking and the other stuff ends up when the windstorms do come. Like I said, we got water that got blown in right through a crack, a damaged tile. And so I would say that the roof itself appears to be fairly robust, resilient right now. But these small issues pop up, and if you're not doing the proper inspection, water did leak in. There could be a mold issue. You can't see it, right? So it's something that I think this report would have caught.
Okay, so then the last part is the insurance lens. Florida, as you know, has a coverage issue. People coming in, people going out, and you were in a hurricane. So the first question is Citizens insuring this property?
Nope.
Okay, so that's good news.
Yes. We are, the property itself is a good 10 miles from the coast. So in Florida terms, that's considered inland. So we're considered inland. We're not coastal.
Okay.
Even though we're a tier 1 county, I don't think there's anyone in our HOA that has not been able to get traditional homeowners insurance.
Now we get into the data. So you've got the property data, which you'll see on a lot of different real estate sites, year built, all sorts of stuff, all sorts of fun stuff like that. Of course, it doesn't have a basement. It has an attached garage, electrical heat and cooling, primarily built of concrete and stucco, and it's in Collier County School District. All basic real estate stuff. The most recent listing was back in 2013, and the market value is about $435,000 on the property. And then here's the ownership changes. All the deed changes that have happened. We don't put the owners on there. We have the data, but we don't put it on there. But there have been some deed changes. And it looks like a company may have bought this property, so it might be corporate owned rather than individually owned.
Yep.
Then the property tax data is a little bit spotty down there in terms of land versus improvement value, but there's the amount that the taxes are for this property over the last several years. Here's the pictures. As you can see, they staged this very lovely when they put it up. And that's the last.
I was going to say, I don't recognize that house.
Yeah, this is the last time it was listed on the MLS.
Wait, can I see the pictures with the cars?
Yeah, there it is. Is that your car? I don't think those are your cars, are they?
Those are not my cars. We do have a Honda.
So this is probably from the last time it was listed. Then we get into things like the roof condition. So what we do is triangulate a lot of data to try to figure out how old is this roof? What's the expected lifespan? What's the primary material? What's the roof condition? And what's the roof exposure?
So as you can see, based upon when the house was built, 2007, roof's 18 years old because it's tile. It's got a 70-year 5-year lifespan, so you've got 57 years left. We note that it is tile. And then based upon the area of the roof and how much materials are and labor, there's a range that we give for the replacement cost of that roof if you had to go out and get a new one. We always decide to show the top end because if it comes in less than that, you'd be happy. But you're looking at about a $44,000 roof replacement. Down below, the grade and condition of the roof, it's an A, basically 4.0 on a 5-point scale. The risk exposure is a medium because you do have some winds. You do on occasion get a hurricane that comes through. You do have a little bit of hail, things along those lines, all of which directly affect the condition of the roof. So while your tile roof, has a little bit more exposure, it's still a tile roof. It'll last a long time. Tile roof here in Southern California has no real exposure because we don't get hurricanes, we don't get hail, we don't get those associated things. As a person who's making a decision potentially on insuring this property, these are things that they would consider.
Next up, damaging events. So it looks like we've had 6 events since 2011, which is not that many. We looked at a property in Boulder, Colorado last week that had 70 events in that same time period. So that's a little more.
I feel better, Bob.
Yeah, a little more gnarly.
So you're thinking of moving to Boulder to avoid damaging events? No.
Okay, so what it looks like here, and this explains some of the things at the top, is the risk for this roof was more hail-driven than it was hurricane-driven. Now, not that something bad didn't happen, but it looks like that according to the data we get back from our governmental sources, that this property was relatively unaffected by the hurricane. Now, you did have that water intrusion, but in terms of the physical structure, it looked like the physical structure survived just fine. But there has been some hail in the past. It's 1.25 inch hail, which is, can do a number on your roof. So that's what we show for this location. And you can actually go back in time and see what things look like across a variety of timelines. This imagery goes back to 2017. So you can start to see what it is that a roof has been doing over the course of a number of years. And of course, if there was a tarp on there, then you'd be like, hey, maybe this roof's being repaired or something like that. So you can, and these clouds are usually shortly after damage events. And we don't see anything particularly onerous about this location. We don't see any permits for this location. We don't have homeowner history or property inspection data for this location. This is the estimated electricity cost for this location, as well as what you could save using solar. And Lee County Electric is your electric provider. So if you need to get service, you just click this button. It'll bring you right to Lee County's site. If you want to get solar, it would recommend about a 9 kilowatt system. It'd be 8 years with federal incentives, assuming they're still in place to repay that investment. And then if you want to get a solar quote, you can just click Get Solar. Your utility uses a lot of natural gas. That's in nuclear, the two big ones. In terms of risks, hurricane, lightning, pollution, sinkholes, a little bit of drought, a little bit of wind, and that's the climate risk. And then here is the FEMA data for this area. You're 217 feet away from a FEMA flood zone, but you are not in a FEMA flood zone, which is always good. Here's weather data. Listen, it's South Florida. Hurricane, storm surge,
Yep.
and lightning are the big ones, along with some sinkhole.
All right. So, we've talked about mold already and termites. The rest of it is perfectly fine. So, the B for a nuclear reactor site, you're basically in the tertiary fallout zone. Radon, not a concern because you don't have a basement and also because it's a low score. And then, the rest of it is all very, very clean. So not a lot of environmental risk here from the things that aren't, nature, so to speak, nature, but in a different way. Really pretty safe from that standpoint. So at least you're not dealing with radon and hurricanes. It's just hurricanes.
And no formerly clandestine drug labs nearby, which is always lovely.
They can catch it. Great.
I was just about to say, if you open up, you have no competition.
So what we do when we pull a report is we send it out to one of our partners who use market information to try to figure out what the insurance premium would be for this location. And it looks like it's between $2,960 and $5,400 for insurance on this property, which is high given the value of the home.
It's pretty spot on.
It's something you should check out, because here's the thing. When you buy a house, the mortgage payment generally stays the same. It's the insurance and the taxes that keep going up every year. And so you can end up in a situation where even if your house is paid off, you can't afford to stay there anymore because everything else has gone up so much. And the replacement cost is about $461,000, which is a little bit more than the expected market value of the house. But the house hasn't been on the market for a long time, so you just really don't know what that market level is right now.
Given what I've seen in market value, it's probably higher than that, but not tremendously so.
And then we give you a couple of options for insurance. If you wanted to get a quote to help solidify things, we don't have any claims for here because currently we don't have claims for Florida in the system. And then crime data, and featuring our newest variable. John, you want to cover this?
Sure. So in looking at the crime, very safe neighborhood, very much to be expected. But the newest piece of information that we've added into the report is sex offenders. So basically, quarter mile, we're going to expand that actually to a half mile. Because when you're buying a house, that can be a concern. So there's our national sex registry offenders, and we've got them. So in your case, there's nothing to report, but if there were, we would actually list who they are, where they are, and what they did.
It looks like the nearest hydrant's a little bit of a ways away.
I don't recall seeing a hydrant anywhere, so I don't even know where it is.
The most important part of fire protection is a hydrant. So you have 3 stations within 5 miles, 8 stations within 10 miles. Nearest police and fire, nearest urgent care, and then finally, the property timeline. So we list out everything by the order of the date that we have it, so you can take a look over time and see exactly what has been happening at this property. Now, if people are doing work on it and there's permits, you'll see more, but this is a pretty good layout of what you can expect to see on a PropertyLens report. So, how'd we do?
Really well. You have the FEMA. You had the FEMA piece up. That seems about right. I mean, they build the properties so that the ground is elevated. So they try to get as many properties outside of flood zones. It does rain a lot though, right? So in a hurricane, precipitation you get a lot of island effect where water will accumulate around your property.
Yep.
But not necessarily enter your property. I think all in all, you kind of nailed it.
is it a retention pond that's right around the
Yeah.
corner of the house? Is it full all the time, or does it only fill up when it rains?
No, so Naples has a really sophisticated water management system. So all of the retaining ponds are connected to one another. So they use the retaining ponds as part of the city's the municipal water management system, so they can move water in and out of these. So when a hurricane comes, they want to try to control where the surge and the flooding goes. So they have the ability to allow water to move from one place to the other. So this is our dry season. So most of these retaining ponds are much lower. They do fill up. We had when Milton hit last fall, the ponds were pretty full as well. And that was the thing I was worried about, not the wind. I was worried that the retaining ponds were already full and Milton would drop a whole bunch of water on them, and potentially water coming into the house was my biggest concern, not the wind.
Is there just a big hose that leads to the Everglades and you just throw all the extra water in there?
Probably. I don't know. There are canals everywhere controlling the water flow.
Because if you could just build a pipe and send it right to California, we'd probably pay you to do that.
Yeah, it's not clean, nice clean water though. Lots of insects and
Oh yeah, we can
bugs
figure all
and
that.
stuff.
Might clog the pipes though. That'd be quite the roto-rooter to go from
Yeah.
Florida to California. Okay, so Nick, given the information that you've seen in this property, if you were looking to buy this property, what would be your top 3 concerns?
Knowing Florida a little bit, always the roof, always. What kind of condition is it in? When am I going to have to replace it? The other thing that you brought up that I think is important that I hadn't thought about was like the water heater or the furnace. Because when the water heater goes, it spills water everywhere, and you can have all kinds of damage associated with that. I hadn't even thought about that until I saw the report. So I would say the condition of the roof, the ancillary stuff, would be another. And I'm a kind of a nerd about this, so it is like what has happened in the past. When John brought up Boulder, like that would be something I would be highly interested in. Like, what am I getting myself into? Right. And it's not just about the ability to insure the property today. It's what am I getting myself into? Is this property going to be insurable a year, 2 years, 3 years from now? We're hearing horror stories. You're going to experience this in California as well, where the insurance rates just keep going up and up and up, and then you can't get coverage anymore. Right. And so now you got to make that tough decision. Like, do we have to sell the property because we can't afford it? Because it's that and taxes just keep going up. I don't think buyers spend enough time thinking about that, but I would.
All right. So John, if you were buying 2177 Fairmont Lane in Naples, Florida, or if you were considering it, what are the top 3 things you would look for?
Well, I think, Lamps mentioned it. It's the age of the structure and the things contained within the structure. The structure is 20 years old, give or take 17, whatever. So that's not bad, but that basically is coming up for end of life for things like the air conditioning, the furnace. Could be the second time that the water heater needs to be replaced. You're also looking at, and we didn't really touch on it, is all of the indoor plumbing. So, nobody replaces their valve stops, but those start going, and then you start having indoor water leaks. So now Lamps is not sleeping at all tonight. So that's, hey, great, talk to those guys never again. The second thing I would think about is, it's Florida, so you've got hurricanes and sinkholes, which I recognize as 2 things, but I'm throwing it in as one. And then, we've already mentioned it, but the roof, even though the roof looks in great shape, It's been subjected to, 3 hail events. Tile, hail, you're probably going to get a crack or two. And, overall, a tile roof should last you a good long time. But, if you start smacking it with 1.25 inch and a half hail, that's a roof that you're going to need to have somebody truly do a tight inspection on to look for cracks, make sure that all the cracks are sealed or the tiles are replaced, to make sure that it stays, because of the winds and the hurricanes, that it actually stays waterproof.
Yeah, John, I would add that this is something I just learned in like the past 2 to 3 years is the roof does look strong, right? But every wind event that it faces weakens it. You don't see it, right? So you're accelerating towards the roof failing, right? At some point. So I think roof lifespans in Florida don't match up to probably like what manufacturer warranties will say they could last, just because they're just constantly exposed to the stuff, including like significant UV and sunlight in the summertime. Like we are low latitude. The sun is beating on these roofs like for hours and hours with massive UV, massive heat, massive humidity. So I think that's something that buyers should be extremely cognizant of. It has faced Irma, Ian, and Milton just in the last few years, right? So is the roof as strong as it was 10 years ago? No way. It's got to be a lot weaker than that. How much weaker? Don't know.
Well, if I were buying or considering buying 2177 Fairmont Lane in Naples, Florida, I would look for these 3 things. Number 1 is mold formation. South Florida is notorious for having mold issues. Given all the weather events, I'd look to see if there's any unusual staining, if there looks like there might be some water that isn't where it's supposed to be. So that's the number 1 thing I would look for. I would feel better knowing that you told me about the bug control, because number 2 would be about the bugs. So you answered that question beautifully, but as you know, South Florida also has a lot of bugs, and termites love to live in that area, and I want to make sure the property hasn't been impacted by them. And the third thing that I would do, and of course I understand you, I appreciate your talking about the roof, but if I'm thinking about owning this house down the line, I really want to figure out a lightning suppression system for the house. Whether it's just a shutoff at the electrical box, or whether it's something I can get from my utility, or whether it's a full lightning remediation system. I would want, if I'm going to live in that house for a long time, I'm going to want to spend the money to put something like that up, because it's really just a matter of time until you get hit. And then you fry all of your electronics, and it's a pain in the neck to replace it. So I think those are the 3 things that I would think about when buying this house. But hey, man, it's Naples. It's like heaven on earth. It's like Nick Lamparelli lives there. Like, why wouldn't you want to live in Naples?
That's what they say. You'll find out soon.
Yeah.
When you drive in, it's on the sign. Nick Lamparelli lives here, so should you.
Yeah. It's part of their new marketing campaign,
So,
I believe.
But Bob, what you'll find out when you come to Naples is there's actually there's 2 parts of Naples. There's the Naples that everybody around the country talks about, and then there's the everything outside of that. I'm outside of that. I even got a text message from someone saying, "Hey, I heard all of the insurance execs live in Naples. Where do they live?" I'm like, the mansions on the bay. That's Naples that everyone knows and loves. I'm just in like a community in Florida.
Yeah, but you know what? That's like Captain Dan on the shrimp boat, living that close to the water. It's like you're just trying to tough it out. You're just trying to ride the waves. But it's thank you for subjecting your property to such a thorough investigation. I hope that you found it worthwhile.
I did. Thank you.
So if you were an insurance person, how would you use this data?
If I were an insurance person, okay,
Yeah.
so not a consumer. If I were
Not
an
a
insurance
consumer.
person, so
Bring your
I think
insurance hat on.
I'm going to put my insurance hat on, Manchester City, And I would say the most ideal insurance professional who would get the most out of this is likely to be an agent or a broker. I mean, they should know this. Like, they should have a sense, right? And I think most agents and brokers, even here in Florida, do not have a sense of both the catastrophic, but also just the traditional hazard exposure that these properties have. And so I don't think it's adequate for a broker or an agent here in Florida to just say, hey, we live in a hurricane zone. I think they should have, this gives them like documentation and also a formal ability to formally present something that places that broker or agent as a trusted advisor in that transaction. So they're not just an insurance transaction taker. You want the property owner keep coming back to you for more information. That's what I would recommend.
And refer your friends, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
because you're a trusted agent. Well, I thank you for your perspective on that. We're a little far from insurance these days, and it's always good to get different perspective on things. So, anything to add before we go?
Anything to add? If Bob doesn't make it this week while he's here in Naples, it was an alligator, it wasn't me.
The alligator's name may be Nick or Lamps or Relly. And thank you.
It was the 24-foot python.
Yeah, it's like, oh wow, they're really big pythons these days.
I will be taking, or I will be recommending to Bob that he goes to a particular rookery that has this is mating season, so there's a lot of basking gators. You might see a python, and you might see a panther. So there's lots of things that could kill you.
Listen, man, I've got me a gator. So it's now in the form of a purse in my wife's bedroom, but I've gotten me a gator, Louisiana style. So gators don't scare me none because I run the other way. It's like unless I've got a 22, I'm running the other way. All right. So for this week's episode of Property of the Week, I'm Bob Frady.
I'm John Sigmund.
And thank you to our special guest,
Nick Lamps.
All right. So we'll see you next time on Property of the Week. Thanks a lot.